My boss was stealing our tips and calling us idiots for not being able to prove it. He laughed in our faces, saying he was untouchable this morning. He was fired and is now being sued, and my bank account is full. Working as a waiter was never my dream, but I needed to pay the bills. The restaurant was high-end, and customers left generous tips, but there was one problem. Ricardo, our manager, was pocketing a cut of that money for himself. At first no one noticed, but over time we started realizing that the tip amounts never matched what customers said they had left. When confronted, he just laughed and said it was restaurant policy. Some employees complained and were fired, others just swallowed their anger, but I didn't. I spent months gathering evidence. Every time a customer mentioned leaving a tip on their card, I wrote it down. I spoke to former employees who confirmed this had been happening for years. I discovered that Ricardo was altering the amounts in the system, and I even convinced some customers to check their statements to confirm that the money was really disappearing. When I had a complete dossier, I sent everything to the restaurant owner, reported it to the Department of Labor, and even forwarded the case to a local journalist. The impact was immediate. Ricardo showed up for work and found the owner waiting for him with a stack of evidence on the table. He tried to deny it, then tried to say it was a common practice, but nothing worked. He was fired on the spot, and since the accusations were serious, he ended up being sued for theft and labor fraud. The restaurant tried to recover from the scandal, but the backlash was so massive that customers disappeared, and a few months later it shut down for good. The employees and I received compensation for the stolen tips, and I was finally able to leave with money in my pocket and a clear conscience. As for Ricardo, he tried to find another job as a manager, but no one wanted to hire someone known for stealing from his own staff. The last I heard, he was working as a cashier at a fast food joint, with no access to other people's money. I never expected that the exposure of this gross injustice would set off a chain of events that would reshape not only my own destiny but also the lives of countless workers around me. After the scandal exploded into the media and sent ripples through our tight-knit community, I found myself thrust into a whirlwind of interviews, protests, and secret meetings with other whistleblowers who had suffered at the hands of corrupt employers. In the weeks that followed Ricardo's downfall, I became a reluctant spokesperson for workers' rights, fielding phone calls from union organizers, receiving messages from former colleagues who had been silenced by fear, and even hearing from customers who expressed their gratitude and disbelief that such blatant exploitation had taken place right under their noses. I remember one particular night, sitting in my cramped apartment with the neon glow of the city filtering through the window, when I received a call from an old friend who worked at another high-end restaurant. His voice trembled with a mixture of anger and sorrow as he confessed that his own boss had been embezzling tips and that the system was rigged to benefit the upper echelons of management. It was then that I realized our battle was not isolated to our little establishment. It was symptomatic of a widespread malaise that had long been ignored by regulatory bodies and protected by a culture of silence. With a growing sense of responsibility, I began to document every detail, from the subtle changes in tip amounts to the whispered confessions of coworkers who feared retaliation if they spoke out. Every piece of evidence I gathered seemed to underscore a bitter truth. The exploitation of workers was institutionalized, woven into the fabric of industries that prided themselves on luxury and exclusivity. As I delved deeper into this underworld of corruption, I encountered individuals who had suffered unspeakable injustices, waiters who had lost their livelihoods, cleaners who had been blacklisted for daring to question their supervisors, and even managers who had turned a blind eye to the exploitation of those beneath them. Motivated by a mix of indignation and a desire to right the wrongs that had plagued me for so long, I began reaching out to advocacy groups and labor unions, determined to use my own experience as a rallying cry for change. My journey took me to small town hall meetings and clandestine gatherings in the back rooms of community centers, where stories of abuse and betrayal flowed freely among those who had been marginalized by a system that saw them as expendable. In one such meeting, held on a chilly autumn evening, I listened intently as an elderly waitress recounted how she had to work through broken bones and barely enough hours to feed her grandchildren, her voice steady despite the pain of years of mistreatment. The room was filled with an electric mixture of grief and defiance, as each person shared their tale of survival, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of systemic injustice. Empowered by these narratives, I began to see that my own battle was just a small part of a much larger struggle, a fight for dignity, fairness, and the recognition that every worker deserved to be treated with respect. With newfound determination, I teamed up with a local lawyer who specialized in labor rights, and together we crafted a legal strategy that aimed not only to reclaim what was rightfully ours but also to set a precedent that could protect future generations of workers from similar exploitation. The legal battle was long and arduous, filled with moments of despair and unexpected setbacks, yet every small victory along the way bolstered our resolve. As the case gathered momentum, it attracted attention from regional news outlets and even caught the eye of influential labor activists, who saw in our struggle a mirror of their own battles against corporate greed. I was invited to speak at community forums and was even asked to contribute to online discussions on platforms like Reddit, where stories of workplace injustice and grassroots activism sparked heated debates and calls for accountability. The digital space, with its cacophony of voices, became a crucial battleground where ordinary people, armed with nothing more than their experiences and a determination to demand change, challenged the status quo. Every post, every comment, and every shared story added to the momentum of the movement, transforming isolated incidents of exploitation into a collective outcry that could no longer be ignored. Amid the chaos of legal proceedings and public outcry, I also had to navigate the personal toll that this relentless fight exacted on my life. Sleepless nights, constant anxiety, and the nagging fear of retaliation became unwelcome companions as I pushed forward with a singular focus on justice. There were moments when the pressure seemed too overwhelming, a heavy burden that threatened to crush the spirit of all that I'd fought for. But in those darkest hours, I found solace in the support of my newfound community, a ragtag group of activists, former colleagues, and even strangers who had reached out with words of encouragement and shared determination. Their resilience became a beacon of hope that reminded me why I had taken this perilous path in the first place. It was not merely about reclaiming stolen tips or righting a personal wrong, it was about challenging a system that had long dehumanized those who toiled in its shadows, transforming them into nothing more than numbers on a balance sheet. As the legal battle raged on, our case evolved from a single lawsuit into a broader movement that questioned the very foundations of corporate ethics. The media coverage intensified, and soon our story was featured in local newspapers, radio shows, and online blogs, each recounting the tale of a brave individual who dared to stand up against an empire of exploitation. With every headline and every broadcast, the narrative grew, weaving together the disparate threads of countless lives into a tapestry of shared struggle and indomitable will. I began receiving letters from workers in distant cities, their words filled with both despair and hope, as they recounted similar tales of deceit and abuse in their own workplaces. Each letter was a call to action, a reminder that the fight for justice was far from over, and that the courage to speak out could ignite a revolution in even the most oppressive of environments. In this digital age, where stories spread faster than ever before, our movement became a symbol of resistance, a rallying cry for those who had long been silenced by fear and subjugation. I remember one particularly moving email from a young man who had recently lost his job after exposing fraudulent practices at the restaurant where he worked. He wrote that my story had given him the strength to confront his own oppressors, to demand accountability, and to believe that a better future was possible. These words, simple yet profound, reinvigorated my spirit and affirmed that our struggle was not in vain. Buoyed by the support of a growing network of allies, I continued to document every twist and turn of our legal journey, every setback that was met with unwavering determination, and every small victory that signified a step toward a more just society. My life had been irrevocably altered by the events that began with a single act of defiance, and now I found myself at the forefront of a movement that transcended the boundaries of my personal experience. The courtroom became a stage where the narrative of exploitation was laid bare for all to see, and with each day that passed, our case set in motion changes that rippled far beyond the confines of our immediate struggle. Labor laws were scrutinized, regulatory bodies were forced to take action, and companies that had long thrived on the exploitation of their workers suddenly found themselves under the watchful eye of an empowered public. The realization that we were not alone, that our voices could be part of a larger chorus demanding justice, filled me with a profound sense of purpose. Even as I navigated the treacherous waters of legal battles, media scrutiny, and personal threats, I remained committed to the ideals that had driven me from the very beginning: fairness, dignity, and the unyielding belief that every worker deserved respect. In the midst of it all, I also began to reflect on the cost of this relentless pursuit of justice. Relationships that had once seemed unbreakable were strained under the weight of constant worry and the ever-present danger of retribution. I found myself questioning whether the sacrifices I was making would ultimately lead to lasting change, or if they were simply the price to be paid in a system that was designed to keep its underlings in perpetual submission. Yet each time I thought of the faces of those who had suffered in silence, of the families that had been torn apart by the greed of a few, I knew that I could not turn back. The struggle was not merely a personal vendetta, it was a crusade against an entrenched culture of exploitation, a fight to reclaim the humanity that had been stripped away by years of indifference and injustice. As the months turned into years, our movement continued to gain traction, evolving into a formidable force that challenged even the most powerful interests. Conferences were held, public forums organized, and the conversation around workers' rights began to shift in ways that I had never imagined possible. What had started as a single courageous act of defiance had blossomed into a nationwide call for reform, one that transcended industries and resonated with anyone who had ever felt voiceless in the face of overwhelming odds. With each new day came fresh challenges but also renewed hope, a belief that through collective action, even the most deeply entrenched systems of exploitation could be dismantled. I recall one particularly poignant moment during a protest march in the heart of the city, where hundreds of workers, armed with signs and unwavering determination, marched side by side in a display of unity that left no doubt about their shared resolve. In that sea of determined faces, I saw the embodiment of our movement, a diverse tapestry of individuals, each with their own story of hardship and resilience, united by the conviction that change was not only possible, but imperative. As I continued to chronicle our journey, every obstacle we encountered served to further galvanize our ranks. We held secret strategy sessions in dimly lit basements, drafted petitions that were signed by thousands, and leveraged social media to spread our message far and wide. The digital age had given us tools that previous generations could only have dreamed of, and we used them to amplify our voices, to demand accountability from those who had long hidden behind closed doors. There were moments when the threat of violence loomed large, anonymous messages warning of dire consequences if we persisted, and whispered rumors of retaliatory acts aimed at silencing our cause, but such threats only deepened our commitment to the fight. I learned to live with a constant undercurrent of vigilance, aware that every step forward was fraught with risk, yet buoyed by the knowledge that our cause was just and our purpose true. In the end, the journey that began with stolen tips and bitter injustice had grown into something far greater. A relentless pursuit of a future where every worker, regardless of their background or station in life, could stand with their head held high and demand the respect they deserved. And while the scars of the past would always remain as reminders of the battles fought and the sacrifices made, they also served as symbols of the strength that could be forged in the crucible of adversity. Today, as I look back on the tumultuous road that brought us to this moment, I see not just the story of a disgraced manager and a small band of determined workers, but the birth of a movement that continues to challenge the very foundations of an unjust system. It is a story of transformation, a narrative in which the voices of the oppressed have risen up to rewrite the rules, to reclaim their dignity, and to insist that exploitation will no longer be tolerated. And though the fight for justice is far from over, every act of defiance, every whispered confession of courage, and every step taken in solidarity reaffirms the belief that together, we can build a world where the worth of a person is not measured by the size of their paycheck, but by the strength of their conviction and the depth of their humanity.